I never thought the woman I loved would leave me dying alone in a hospital bed like I was nothing more than an embarrassment to her perfect world. For 3 years, I let my white wife and her racist mother treat me like hired help at their $1 million dinner parties, correcting my manners and whispering about appropriate matches when they thought I couldn't hear. But when I collapsed at their family luncheon and she chose a charity gala over staying by my side, I realized something that would change everything. See, there was one tiny detail about my family that even I didn't know. A secret my late father had buried so deep that it would turn their entire world upside down. The moment I walked out of that hospital as a completely different man, my wife actually fainted, and what I did next was the sweetest revenge she never saw coming. If you're watching this, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know if you've ever had to choose between your dignity and someone you loved. The fluorescent lights in my garage hummed like angry wasps. I wiped the sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand, leaving a streak of engine oil across my skin. The smell of motor oil and metal filled my nose. It was barely 7 in the morning, but I'd been here for an hour already. My hands shook as I reached for the wrench, not from nerves, from whatever was making me feel like garbage these past few days. My stomach had been twisted in knots and I couldn't keep food down, but I couldn't afford to take a day off. Missing work meant missing money. Missing money meant falling behind on bills. The customer's car sat in front of me with its hood open like a hungry mouth. A simple brake job. Should take me 2 hours max. I just had to push through the dizziness that kept washing over me in waves. My phone buzzed on the workbench. A text from Vivian, my wife. Big family luncheon today. Don't embarrass me. I stared at the message. No. Good morning. No. How are you feeling? Just a warning wrapped up like an order. My chest tightened as I remembered the last family gathering. Her mother, Cynthia, had spent the whole afternoon correcting everything I did. How I held my fork, how I sat in my chair, the way I said certain words, like I was some kind of project that needed fixing. I tried to eat the sandwich I'd packed, but my stomach rejected it after 2 bites. The bread felt like cardboard in my mouth. I wrapped it back up and shoved it in my lunch bag. No point in wasting food I couldn't keep down anyway. The garage felt smaller today. The walls seemed to press in on me as I worked. Every few minutes, I had to stop and lean against the car to catch my breath. This wasn't normal, but I'd been hiding it from everyone, especially Vivienne. She hated weakness. Around 10:30, I finished the brake job and cleaned up my tools. The customer would be happy. The brakes were smooth as butter now. I wished fixing my own life was that simple. Replace the worn parts, tighten what was loose, make everything work like new. I locked up the garage and walked to my car. It was an old Honda with rust spots and a crack in the windshield. Nothing fancy, nothing that would impress anyone at Vivian's family mansion. But it ran, and it was mine. The drive to the Ashford estate took 20 minutes. 20 minutes to prepare myself for another afternoon of feeling invisible. The mansion sat behind iron gates like a castle. Perfect green lawn, flowers planted in neat rows, everything in its place. I pulled into the circular driveway and turned off the engine. Through the windshield, I could see the house staff moving around inside. They always looked through me like I wasn't there, like I was just another delivery guy who'd wandered up to the wrong door. My chest felt tight as I got out of the car. The sun was bright, but I felt cold. I forced a smile onto my face, the same smile I wore every time I came. Here, the smile that said I belonged, even when I knew I didn't. The front door was massive, dark wood with brass handles that probably cost more than I made in a month. I straightened my shoulders and walked toward it. Another performance was about to begin. The dining room sparkled like something from a magazine. Crystal glasses caught the sunlight streaming through tall windows. Silver forks and knives were arranged perfectly on white plates. Everything was beautiful and cold. Vivian sat across from me, looking perfect as always. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a way that probably took an hour to get right. Her dress probably cost more than my rent. She was talking to her mother about some charity event, but her voice had that edge to it, the edge that meant she was already annoyed. Cynthia Ashford sat at the head of the table like a queen on her throne. Her gray hair was swept up in a perfect bun. Her jewelry sparkled when she moved. She had a way of looking at people that made them feel small, especially me. "And how is the automobile business, Darius?" Cynthia asked, her voice sweet as honey but sharp as glass. She always said automobile business like it was something dirty. "It's good, Mrs. Ashford. Steady work." I kept my voice even, polite. "How practical." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's so important to have honest work, even if it's manual." The other women at the table nodded. They all looked the same to me. Perfect hair, perfect clothes, perfect smiles that meant nothing. "Of course, breeding does matter," one of them said. "Some people are just naturally suited for certain levels of society." My heart started beating faster. I knew what they were really saying. They were talking about me without talking about me, making sure I knew I didn't belong here. Vivienne didn't say anything. She just cut her food into tiny pieces and kept her eyes on her plate, like she was trying to pretend I wasn't there too. I reached for my water glass, but my hand shook. The crystal felt heavy and slippery. Everything in the room seemed too bright suddenly, too loud. "Darius, your posture," Vivian said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "And use your napkin." Heat crawled up my neck. I straightened up and put the napkin in my lap, like a kid being corrected in front of the whole class. "Some people just don't know proper table manners," Cynthia said to her friend. "It's not their fault, really. They simply weren't raised with refinement." My vision started to blur around the edges. The room felt like it was spinning slowly. I needed air. I needed to get out of here. "Vivienne," I said, leaning toward her, "I'm not feeling well. Can we leave early?" She looked at me like I'd just asked her to set the house on fire. "Don't be dramatic, Darius. We just got here. I think I might be sick." The words came out quieter than I wanted, weaker. "You're fine," she said through her teeth. "Just eat your food and stop making a scene." I tried to stand up, but the room tilted sideways. My legs felt like water. I reached out to catch myself on the table, but my hand knocked over a crystal glass. It shattered on the floor with a sound like breaking ice. Everyone stared. The perfect lunch party had been ruined by the sick black man who couldn't even stand up properly. "Oh dear," Cynthia said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "He's always been rather fragile." The last thing I heard before everything went dark was Vivian's voice, sharp and embarrassed. "Someone call an ambulance, but please be discreet." The hospital lights were too bright. Everything was white and sterile and beeping. I lay on a gurney in the emergency room, staring up at ceiling tiles with brown water stains. A nurse with kind eyes leaned over me. Her name tag said Marla Reyes. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and hands that looked like they'd worked hard for everything they had. "Can you tell me your name, honey?" she asked. "Darius Cole." "Good. And who can we call for you? Your emergency contact?" I looked around the room. Vivian had disappeared right after we got here. Something about taking important calls. That was 20 minutes ago. "My wife should be here somewhere," I said. Marla wrote something on her clipboard. "What about other family? Parents? Siblings?" "My mom, Loretta Cole." I gave her the number, but then I remembered. "Actually, don't call her yet. My wife said not to worry anyone unnecessarily." Marla's eyebrows went up slightly, but she didn't say anything. She just nodded and kept writing. A doctor came by and poked at me for a while, asked a million questions about how I was feeling, what I'd been eating, when the symptoms started. I answered as best I could, but everything felt fuzzy around the edges. "We're going to run some tests," the doctor said. "It looks like you're severely dehydrated, and there might be an infection. We'll know more in a few hours." That's when Vivian came back. Her heels clicked on the linoleum floor like a countdown timer. She looked annoyed, like this whole thing was a major inconvenience. "How much longer is this going to take?" she asked the doctor. "I have a charity committee meeting at 4. The doctor blinked at her. "Ma'am, your husband is quite sick. We're still running tests. But he's going to be fine, right? I mean, it's not serious?" I stared at her from my hospital bed. She was more worried about her committee meeting than whether I was dying. "We need to keep him for observation," the doctor said. "At least overnight, maybe longer." Vivian's face went pale. "Overnight? But I can't. I have obligations." "The hospital has very simple visiting hours," Marla said from the corner. Her voice was professional, but I caught something else in it. Something protective. Vivian pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. "I need to make some calls about privacy. I don't want random family members being notified about this." "Random family?" Marla asked. "His mother can be dramatic. She'll just make things worse." Vivian didn't even look at me when she said it. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not physical, something deeper. The doctor left to check on other patients. Vivian spent the next hour on her phone, whispering about meetings and commitments and how this was really bad timing. Like my being sick was something I'd done on purpose to ruin her day. As the sun started to set outside the window, she gathered up her purse and checked her watch. "I have to go," she said, still not looking at me. "Mother needs me for something important." "What about my phone charger?" I asked. "And maybe you could call my mom, just to let her know?" Vivian was already walking toward the door. "I'm sure you'll be fine. Don't make this into a bigger thing than it is." And then she was gone. Her heels clicked down the hallway until I couldn't hear them anymore. Marla came back into the room a few minutes later. She plugged a phone charger into the wall next to my bed and handed me a cup of water with a straw. "I had an extra charger," she said quietly, "and you look like you need water." I wanted to say thank you, but my throat felt raw, like I'd been screaming even though I'd barely said a word all day. Outside my window, rain started to fall. My phone rang around 8 o'clock. Vivian's name lit up the screen. I answered on the third ring, hoping she was calling to say she was coming back. "Darius? Listen, I can't stay at the hospital tonight. Mother needs me to handle something urgent with the foundation. You understand, right?" My mouth felt dry as sand. "What kind of urgent thing?" "It's complicated. Family business. Look, you're in good hands there. The doctors know what they're doing. Could you maybe bring my phone charger and call my mom? She should know I'm here." "Your phone charger? Darius, I'm dealing with a crisis here. Can't you ask the nurses for one?" "Vivian, please, and I really don't think we need to worry your mother over nothing. You know how she gets. She'll just panic and make everything harder." The line went quiet for a moment. I could hear voices in the background, laughter, the sound of glasses clinking together. "Where are you?" I asked. "I told you. With Mother. We're handling foundation business." More laughter in the background. It didn't sound like business to me. "I have to go," she said. "Don't make this into a thing, okay? I'll check in tomorrow." The line went dead. I stared at my phone until the screen went black. I tried calling her back, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent a text asking her to please call my mom, but it showed as undelivered. My phone battery was dying, and I didn't have a way to charge it. Marla came by during her rounds and quietly plugged in my phone again. She didn't ask questions, but I saw her looking at the water cup she'd brought me. It was still full. Try to drink something, she said gently. Even just sips. I managed to get down a few swallows. It felt like swallowing glass, but I did it anyway. Outside in the hallway, I could hear other patients talking to their families, quiet conversations full of worry and love. I listened to a man in the next room talking to his wife about bringing his favorite blanket from home. She promised to be there first thing in the morning. Nobody was promising to be here for me in the morning. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom. Haven't heard from you in a few days. Everything okay? I started to type back, but my phone died before I could send it. The screen went black, and the room felt darker somehow. Rain kept tapping against the window like fingers drumming on glass. The sound was lonely and steady, like it was trying to tell me something I didn't want to hear. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but my chest felt tight with something that had nothing to do with being sick. It felt like drowning, except I was still breathing. In the hallway, I heard more laughter, nurses talking about their plans for the weekend, normal people living normal lives where people showed up for each other. I drifted off to the sound of rain and distant voices, and I dreamed about floating alone in dark water while everyone I loved stood on the shore, looking the other way. When I woke up, it was still dark outside. The shift had changed, and new nurses moved quietly through the hallways. My fever had broken sometime during the night, but I felt weak as a newborn kitten. Around 6 in the morning, I heard familiar footsteps in the corridor. Marla was back, starting another day of taking care of people who needed someone to show up for them. She peeked into my room and smiled when she saw I was awake. "How are you feeling, honey?" she asked, checking the machines next to my bed. "Better? I think the fever's gone." "That's good. You were pretty sick yesterday." She paused, looking at something on my chart. "Your wife hasn't been back?" I shook my head. My throat still felt raw. Marla sat down in the plastic chair next to my bed. "Can I ask you something? Do you have someone who actually shows up for you?" The question hit me like a punch to the stomach, because the honest answer was no. I had people who loved me, but I'd been keeping them away. Vivian always made me feel like my family wasn't good enough for her world. "My mom," I said quietly. "But my wife, she doesn't want me to worry her." "Your mom's number. Can you give it to me?" I hesitated. Vivian would be furious if she found out. "Honey," Marla said, her voice gentle but firm. "You're sick. You're alone. That's not right." I gave her my mom's number. Marla walked to the nurse's station, and I could hear her making the call. Her voice was quiet and kind as she explained the situation. A few minutes later, she came back. "She's coming." She sounded really worried, but she's coming. Relief washed over me like cool water. My mom was coming. Someone who actually cared about me was coming. That's when I heard high heels clicking down the hallway again. Slow, deliberate steps. But these weren't Vivian's shoes. Cynthia Ashford appeared in my doorway like a storm cloud. She was perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, and perfectly terrifying. She looked around the hospital room like it was contaminated with something disgusting. "Darius," she said, her voice smooth as silk and cold as winter. "We need to talk." Marla stepped closer to my bed. I could feel the tension in the air like electricity before lightning. "My daughter has made some unfortunate choices," Cynthia continued, stepping into the room uninvited. "But that doesn't mean the rest of us have to suffer the consequences forever." "Mrs. Ashford," I started, but she held up one perfectly manicured hand. "Let me be very clear about something. My daughter married beneath her world, far beneath it, and while I cannot undo that particular mistake, I can certainly prevent it from becoming a permanent embarrassment to our family." She moved closer to my hospital bed, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt louder than shouting. "Don't cling, Darius. Whatever little fantasy you have about belonging in our world, let it go. Some gaps are simply too wide to bridge. The words hit me like physical blows. This woman was telling me, while I lay sick in a hospital bed, that I would never be good enough for her daughter, that I was an embarrassment to be tolerated, not a person to be loved. You're nothing but a phase, she continued, a rebellion, and when Vivian comes to her senses, you'll be exactly what you were before you met her. A mechanic from the wrong side of town with dirty fingernails and big dreams. She straightened up, smoothed her skirt, and smiled. That perfect, horrible smile. Get well soon, dear, but don't get comfortable. She turned and walked out of the room, her heels clicking like a countdown timer. The smell of her expensive perfume lingered in the air like poison. I stared at the empty doorway until Marla's warm hand touched my arm. You're not crazy, she said quietly. That was cruelty, pure and simple. My hands were shaking, not from fever this time, from rage, from humiliation, from the horrible understanding that maybe Cynthia was right. Maybe I was just clinging to something that was never really mine to begin with. But Marla's hand on my arm was steady and real, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear my mother's voice in the lobby, asking directions to my room. Maybe I was nothing to the Ashfords, but I was something to somebody, and for now, that would have to be enough. The sound of my mother's voice in the hallway was like hearing music after days of silence. Loretta Cole didn't walk anywhere. Quietly. She moved with purpose, asking questions, demanding answers, making sure people knew she wasn't going anywhere until she got what she came for. Where is my son? I heard her say to someone at the nurse's station. Darius Cole, room 314. And don't tell me visiting hours haven't started yet because I've been driving for an hour and I'm not waiting in any lobby. I smiled for the first time in 2 days. Mama didn't play when it came to her children. She appeared in my doorway like a guardian angel wearing a worn winter coat and carrying a purse big enough to hold groceries. Her gray hair was pulled back in the same simple bun she'd worn for 20 years. Her face was lined with worry, but her eyes were fierce with love. Baby, she said, rushing to my bedside. What happened? Why didn't you call me sooner? Before I could answer, she was checking my forehead for fever, adjusting my pillows, and pulling snacks out of her purse like she was setting up camp. The nurse called me this morning, she said. That sweet girl Marla said you'd been here since yesterday and nobody called your family. What kind of nonsense is that? Marla appeared behind her, smiling. Mrs. Cole, I'm Marla Reyes. We spoke on the phone. Honey, thank you for calling me. Thank you for looking after my boy when. She stopped herself, but I knew what she was going to say. When his wife wouldn't. He's been a model patient, Marla said diplomatically. The fever broke this morning, and his test results are looking better. Mama sat down heavily in the plastic chair and really looked at me for the first time. I saw her take in the hospital gown, the IV in my arm, the circles under my eyes. You've lost weight, she said. How long have you been feeling sick? A few days, maybe a week. It's hard to tell. And where is Vivian? The way she said my wife's name told me everything. Mama had never liked Vivian, but she'd tried to be polite for my sake. I looked at Marla, then back at my mother. She had family obligations, foundation business. Mama's eyebrows went up so high they almost disappeared into her hairline. Family obligations? Baby, you are her family. It's complicated, Mama. Complicated how? You're in the hospital. She should be here. Period. Marla cleared her throat gently. I'll let you two talk. Mrs. Cole, there's a family room down the hall if you need anything. Coffee, phone, whatever you need. After she left, Mama pulled her chair closer to my bed. Tell me the truth, Darius. What's really going on? So I did. I told her about the luncheon, about Cynthia's comments, about Vivian leaving me here alone. I told her about the phone calls that never came and the promises that were never kept. I told her everything except the part about Cynthia's visit this morning. That cruelty was mine to carry. Mama listened without interrupting. Her face got harder with each detail, but she didn't explode until I got to the part about Vivian not wanting to worry her. Not worry me? She said, her voice rising. My son is sick in the hospital and she doesn't want to worry me. Who does she think she is? Mama, please keep your voice down. I will not keep my voice down. This is wrong, baby. This is so wrong it makes my heart hurt. She pulled out her phone and started dialing. What are you doing? Calling your wife. She needs to explain herself. Mama, no. It'll just make things worse. Worse than what? Worse than leaving you here alone while she goes to parties? The phone rang and rang, then went to voicemail. Mama hung up and tried again. Same thing. She's not answering, Mama said, her voice tight with anger. That's when my friend Marcus from the garage showed up. He knocked on the doorframe and peeked in, holding a bag from the deli down the street from my shop. Hey man, heard you were laid up. Brought you some real food. He stopped when he saw my mother. Oh, hey, Mrs. Cole. Good to see you. Marcus, baby. Thank you for coming. He set the bag on the table and pulled out his phone. Yo, you seen this? He asked, showing me the screen. It was Vivian's social media. A picture from last night. She was dressed in a shimmering gold dress, standing under crystal chandeliers at some fancy event. She was smiling bright as sunshine, holding a champagne glass. The caption read, supporting local arts with the Family Foundation. So grateful to give back to our community. Blessed Life Foundation. I stared at the picture while I lay in a hospital gown with an IV in my arm. This was posted last night, Marcus said quietly, around 9 o'clock. The same time she was telling me she couldn't come back because of urgent foundation business. Except the business looked more like a party, and she looked more like someone celebrating than someone handling a crisis. Mama looked at the phone and her face went stone cold. That's where she was? At a party? While you were here sick and alone? I couldn't answer. The picture said everything. Marcus put his phone away and looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry, man. I thought, I figured you knew. It's okay, I said, but it wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. After Marcus left, Mama and Marla coordinated the practical things I needed. Phone charger, real food, clean clothes, the basic care that comes naturally when people actually love you. But the whole time, I kept thinking about that picture. Vivian under those chandeliers, smiling like she didn't have a care in the world, like she didn't have a husband lying sick in a hospital bed across town. The room felt smaller with each passing hour, not because of the space, but because of the truth that was growing larger and larger until there was no room for anything else. My wife didn't love me. Not really, and maybe she never had. Late that afternoon, Marla came to check on me one more time before her shift ended. Mama had gone to get coffee and make some phone calls in the family room. How are you holding up? Marla asked, adjusting something on the IV machine. Been better, I said. Your mother's a force of nature. I like her. She doesn't like my wife very much. Marla was quiet for a moment, checking my chart. Can I ask you something? And you don't have to answer if you don't want to. I nodded. Do you feel loved in your marriage? The question hit me like a physical blow, because the honest answer was no. I felt tolerated. I felt managed. I felt like a problem to be solved or a mistake to be hidden. But loved? No. It's complicated, I said. Love isn't complicated. Everything around love can be complicated. But love itself? Love shows up. Love stays. Love doesn't leave you alone when you need it most. Before I could respond, there was a commotion in the hallway. Voices. One of them angry and familiar. I don't care what your policy is. I want to see my son-in-law. Now. Vivian. She was here. Finally. But she didn't sound worried. She sounded irritated. Marla and I looked at each other. I'll give you privacy, she said, gathering up her things. Vivian appeared in the doorway wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like she was heading to brunch, not visiting her sick husband. Finally, she said, like I was the one who'd been keeping her waiting. Do you know how hard it was to get away? Hello, Vivian. She sat down in the plastic chair but perched on the edge like she might need to make a quick escape. You look better, she said. The nurse said your fever broke? This morning. Good. So you'll probably be released tomorrow? I stared at her. I don't know. Maybe. I need you to understand something, Darius. Yesterday was a nightmare for me. Mother had a complete meltdown after what happened at lunch. She was convinced people would think our family couldn't handle stress. I spent the entire evening doing damage control. Damage control? Making sure people understood that you just had a little dizzy spell. Nothing serious. Nothing that reflects poorly on our family's stability. My mouth fell open. I collapsed and was taken away in an ambulance. Exactly. Do you know how that looked? In front of Mother's friends? They were asking questions all night. Questions about what? About whether you're stable, reliable, whether this is the kind of thing that happens often. I felt like she was speaking a foreign language. I was sick, Vivian, seriously sick. But you're fine now, right? I mean, it wasn't anything major. Before I could answer, Mama came back from the family room. She stopped dead when she saw Vivian. Well, well, Mama said, her voice dripping with ice. Look who finally showed up. Vivian stood up quickly. Mrs. Cole, I didn't know you were here. Of course you didn't. Because you didn't call me. You left my son here alone for almost 2 days. I was handling a family crisis. Your family crisis was at a charity party, Mama said, pulling out her phone with the social media picture. Champagne and chandeliers while your husband was hooked up to an IV. Vivian's face went white, then red. You don't understand the pressure I was under, the questions people were asking. I had to manage the situation. The situation? Mama's voice rose. You mean your sick husband? I mean the optics, the way things looked. Mother was beside herself. And where was your mother when Darius was lying here alone? Where were you? Vivian straightened up, and I saw something cold slide across her face, something that looked exactly like her mother. I was protecting our family's reputation, something Darius seems incapable of doing himself. The words hung in the air like poison gas. I felt every molecule of oxygen leave my lungs. Excuse me? Mama said, her voice deadly quiet. I said what I said. This whole thing was embarrassing. Collapsing at a family luncheon like someone who can't handle civilized society. That's when I found my voice. Get out. Vivian turned to look at me, surprised. What? I said get out. Leave. Now. Darius, you're being dramatic. Get out. The words came from somewhere deep in my chest, somewhere I'd been keeping my anger locked away for months. Vivian took a step back, genuinely shocked. You're not thinking clearly. You're still sick. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. You left me here alone. You lied about why you couldn't come back. You're more worried about what your mother's friends think than whether I live or die. So get out. I don't want to see you right now. She stood there for a moment, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then she grabbed her purse and walked to the door. Fine. Call me when you've calmed down and can discuss this like an adult. She left without looking back. The room felt lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted off my chest. Mama sat down beside me and took my hand. Baby, I am so proud of you. For what? For finally standing up to her. For finally saying enough. I squeezed her hand, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, like maybe I was worth standing up for after all. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. I was finishing breakfast when an older black man appeared in my doorway. He was well dressed, but not flashy. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, and his eyes were kind but sharp. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. Darius? He said, stepping into the room. I'm Silas Cole, your father's brother. My Uncle Silas. I hadn't seen him since I was maybe 12 years old. There had been some kind of family fight, and he disappeared from our lives. Mama never talked about him much. Uncle Silas? I tried to sit up straighter, in the hospital bed. In the flesh. May I come in? I nodded, confused but curious. He sat down in the plastic chair and really looked at me, like he was trying to see something specific. Your mama called me, he said. Told me what's been happening, about your wife, about you being here alone. I didn't know she had your number. She didn't. I've been keeping track of the family from a distance, making sure everyone was okay, even if we weren't talking. Why weren't you talking? I asked. Silas smiled sadly. Pride, stubbornness, the usual reasons families fall apart. But that's a conversation for another day. Right now, I want to talk about you. He pulled out a business card and handed it to me. It was simple, expensive looking, just his name and a phone number. I've been successful in business, he said simply. Very successful. And I've been watching you struggle with people who don't appreciate what they have. I don't understand. Your wife's family, they think they're better than us because they've had money longer. But money doesn't make character, son. Money just makes noise. I looked at the business card. What kind of business? Import and export. Started small, grew big. The details don't matter right now. What matters is that you have options you don't know about yet. Before I could ask what he meant, Mama came back from the cafeteria with coffee for both of us. Silas, she said, surprised but not unhappy. I didn't expect you to come in person. Figured it was time, he said, standing up to hug his sister-in-law. Past time, actually? They talked quietly for a few minutes about family stuff, catching up on years of lost time. But I could see Silas watching me out of the corner of his eye, like he was making some kind of decision. Darius, he said finally, I want you to think about something. You've been playing by other people's rules, living in other people's world, trying to earn respect from people who were never going to give it to you. I love my wife, I said, but the words felt hollow even as I said them. I'm sure you do, but does she love you? Really love you? Or does she love the idea of having a project to fix? The question hit too close to home. I didn't answer. When you get out of here, Silas continued, I want you to come see me. Let me show you some things. Let me tell you some stories about our family that you've never heard. What kind of stories? The kind that might change how you see yourself and how you let other people see you. He stood up and put his hand on my shoulder. You're a Cole, son. Don't ever forget that. And Coles don't beg for respect. We earn it and we command it. After he left, I stared at his business card for a long time. There was something about Uncle Silas that felt different from everyone else in my life. He talked like someone who'd never had to apologize for taking up space in the world. That afternoon, the doctor came by with good news. My infection was responding to the antibiotics, and I could go home the next day as long as someone could keep an eye on me for a few days. I'll stay with him, Mama said without hesitation. As evening approached, I found myself thinking about Silas's question. Did Vivian really love me, or was I just a project to her? A rough stone she was trying to polish until I looked like something that belonged in her world. The truth was starting to become clear, and it hurt worse than any physical sickness I'd ever felt. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I made a decision. When I got out of this hospital, I was going to find out exactly who Darius Cole was supposed to be. Not who Vivian wanted me to be, not who Cynthia thought I could never be, who I actually was. And maybe, just maybe, that person was stronger than any of them realized. The next morning, I was discharged with a bag full of prescription bottles and instructions to rest for at least a week. Marla came by before I left, bringing me a small card with her personal phone number. Just in case you need someone to talk to, she said. Someone who's not involved in all the family drama. Thank you, I said, for everything. You probably saved my life. You saved your own life, she said. You just needed someone to help you remember you were worth saving. Mama drove me home to my apartment. It was a small two-bedroom place in a working-class neighborhood, clean but simple. Nothing fancy, nothing that would impress anyone from Vivian's world. But as I walked through the front door and saw my own furniture, my own books, my own life spread out around me, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. I felt like I belonged somewhere. Mama made herself at home, cooking soup and fussing over me like I was still 10 years old. It felt good to be fussed over by someone who actually cared whether I lived or died. That evening, my phone rang. Vivian's name appeared on the screen. Are you going to answer it? Mama asked. I looked at the phone, then at my mother, then back at the phone. For the first time in our marriage, I let it go to voicemail. Later that night, after Mama had gone to bed in my spare room, I listened to the message. Darius, this is ridiculous. We need to talk like adults. I know you're upset, but you can't just ignore me forever. Call me back. I deleted the message without saving it. Then, I pulled out Uncle Silas's business card and stared at it until I fell asleep on the couch, dreaming about families and secrets and the person I used to be before I started trying to become someone else. Tomorrow, I decided, I was going to call my uncle. Tomorrow, I was going to start learning who Darius Cole really was. 3 days later, I was sitting in the passenger seat of Uncle Silas's black Mercedes, watching the city change around us as we drove through neighborhoods I'd never seen before. We'd started in my working class area and slowly moved through parts of town where the houses got bigger, the lawns got greener, and the cars got more expensive. Where exactly are we going? I asked. My office, Silas said simply. I want to show you something. We pulled up to a sleek glass building in the business district, the kind of place I'd driven past 1,000 times but never imagined walking into. The parking garage was full of cars that cost more than most people's houses. Silas led me to a private elevator that required a key card. We rode up in silence to the 20th floor. The elevator doors opened directly into an office that looked like something from a movie. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. The furniture was modern but warm. Everything was clean, organized, and expensive without being flashy. This is yours? I asked, walking to the window. Has been for 15 years, Silas said, settling into the chair behind a massive wooden desk. Started with one shipping container and a dream. Now we move cargo all over the world. I turned around to face him. Why didn't I know about this? Why did you disappear from our lives? Silas was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the city below us. Your father and I had different ideas about how to handle success, he said finally. He thought I was getting too big for my britches, thought I was forgetting where I came from. We said some things to each other that we couldn't take back. What kind of things? The kind of things proud men say when they're both right and both wrong at the same time. He looked at me directly. I wanted to share what I'd built, help the family. Your father thought that would make him look like he couldn't provide for his own son. The weight of that settled over me like a heavy blanket. All these years, I'd been struggling to make ends meet while my uncle was building an empire 20 minutes away. After your father died, Silas continued, I thought about reaching out, but your mama was grieving, and I didn't want to complicate things. Then you got married, and I figured you were building your own life. Didn't need an old man stirring up the past. But you kept track of us. Of course I did. Your family. I knew about your garage, knew about your wife, knew you were struggling. His voice got harder, and I knew her people were treating you like you weren't good enough. He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a thick folder. Darius, what I'm about to tell you is going to change everything. But before I say it, I need you to understand something. Your father was a good man, a proud man, but he made some choices that affected your whole life, and you deserve to know the truth. My hands felt shaky suddenly. What kind of choices? Silas opened the folder and pulled out a legal document. When your father died, he left you something, something significant, but he put it in a trust with conditions. What kind of conditions? You couldn't access it until you were 30 or until you proved you could stand on your own without help from your wife's family, whichever came first. My brain felt like it was moving through thick mud. I don't understand. Your father saw what was happening with you and Vivian's people, how they made you feel small, how they treated our family like we were nothing. He wanted to make sure you never had to beg them for anything. Silas handed me the document. The legal language was confusing, but the numbers at the bottom were crystal clear. $250 million. I read it 3 times before the words made sense. This can't be real, I whispered. It's real. Your father invested in my company early on, way before it got big, but he made me promise not to tell you unless you really needed to know. $250 million? Plus the compound interest over the years, plus your share of ongoing profits. Silas leaned back in his chair. Son, you're not just rich, you're generational wealth rich. The room started spinning. I sat down hard in the chair across from his desk. Why now? Why tell me this now? Because yesterday I got a very interesting phone call from your wife. My blood went cold. Vivienne called you? She did. Seems she's been asking around about your family, trying to find out if there were any assets she should know about, in case things go south with your marriage. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. She's planning to divorce me? I don't know what she's planning, but I know she's not planning to go down without a fight, and I decided it was time you had some weapons of your own. Silas pulled out another document. This one was shorter, simpler. This gives you immediate access to a trust fund worth $50 million, walking around money while we sort out the bigger picture. The account will be active by tomorrow morning. I stared at the paper. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold it. Uncle Silas, I can't. This is too much. I don't know how to be rich. You don't have to know how to be rich, son. You just have to know how to be yourself. The money doesn't change who you are. It just changes what you can do about it. He walked around the desk and put his hand on my shoulder. Your father wanted you to have choices, real choices, not the kind where you have to smile and take whatever scraps people throw at you. What about Mama? Does she know? She knows some of it. She knew your father left you something, but she didn't know how much. I'll talk to her tonight. I stood up and walked back to the window, looking down at the city that suddenly looked completely different. All those buildings down there, all those people living their lives, and here I was, 20 floors above it all, finding out I could probably buy half of what I was looking at. What happens now? I asked. That's up to you. You can go back to your garage and pretend this conversation never happened. You can try to patch things up with your wife and never tell her about the money. Or, 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 you can stop apologizing for taking up space in the world. Stop begging people to respect you. Start living like the man you actually are instead of the man they told you to be. I thought about Vivian leaving me in that hospital bed, about Cynthia telling me I was beneath their world, about years of feeling like I had to earn the right to exist in my own marriage. I want to see my wife, I said quietly. You sure about that? Yeah, but not the way I used to see her. I want to see her with fresh eyes. Silas smiled for the first time since I'd known him. Now you're talking like a Cole. That evening, I called Vivian. She answered on the first ring. Darius, finally. We need to talk. I agree. Let's meet tomorrow. Neutral place. Why neutral? Come to the house. We can have privacy. Hotel downtown, the Renaissance, lobby bar, 7 o'clock. There was a pause. Why are you being so formal? 7 o'clock, Vivian. Be there or don't. Up to you. I hung up before she could argue. Mama was in the kitchen making dinner when I walked into my apartment. She took one look at my face and knew something had changed. How did it go with Silas? I sat down at the kitchen table and told her everything. About the money, about Dad's trust, about the phone call from Vivian. Mama listened without interrupting, but I could see her getting angrier with each detail. That woman, she said finally, calling around behind your back, trying to figure out what she could take from you, while you're still recovering from being sick. Did you know, Mama, about any of it? I knew your father put some money aside for you, but I thought it was maybe $10 or $20,000. Life insurance money. I had no idea it was. She shook her head. Your father was always secretive about money, said he didn't want to jinx anything. Are you mad that I didn't know? Baby, I'm mad that your wife is treating you like an enemy instead of a partner. The money doesn't matter. What matters is that she's already planning her exit strategy while you're trying to save your marriage. That night, I lay awake thinking about the last 3 years. All the times Vivian had made me feel like I wasn't good enough. All the times I'd apologized for things that weren't my fault. All the times I'd made myself smaller so she could feel bigger. What would have happened if I'd known about the money from the beginning? Would she have treated me differently? Would her family have welcomed me with open arms instead of looking at me like I was something they'd stepped in? The answer made me sick to my stomach, because I already knew it was yes. They would have loved me if they'd known I had money, which meant they'd never loved me at all. The next evening, I walked into the Renaissance Hotel like a different person. I'd gotten my hair cut, bought a new shirt, and for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged wherever I was. The lobby bar was elegant, but not stuffy. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, quiet jazz music in the background. The kind of place where serious conversations happened. I arrived first and chose a table where I could see the entrance. When Vivian walked in 15 minutes later, I watched her scan the room until she spotted me. She looked beautiful, like always. Hair perfect, makeup flawless, dress that probably cost more than my car payment. But for the first time, her beauty didn't make me feel inadequate. It just made me sad. You look good, she said, sitting down across from me. Rested. Thank you. She ordered a glass of wine. I ordered coffee. We sat in silence for a moment, sizing each other up like strangers. I'm glad you called, she said finally. We need to clear the air about what happened at the hospital. Do we? Of course we do. You were sick, probably not. Thinking clearly. Things were said that we both regret. What things do you regret saying? She paused, clearly expecting me to go first. Well, I may have been a little harsh. The stress of the situation got to me. What situation? Darius, don't be difficult. You know what I mean. The embarrassment at Mother's luncheon, the questions from her friends, the way it all looked. I leaned back in my chair and really looked at her. How did it look, Vivienne? Like we can't handle normal social situations. Like there are problems in our marriage that we can't control. Are there problems in our marriage? Every marriage has problems, but we don't air them in public. What about in private? Do we handle them in private? She took a sip of her wine and looked around the bar, avoiding my eyes. What's this really about, Darius? It's about respect. I respect you. Do you? Or do you manage me? I don't know what that means. I leaned forward. It means you didn't. Stay with me in the hospital. It means you told the staff not to call my family. It means you went to a party while I was alone and sick, then lied about where you were. I didn't lie. I said I was handling foundation business. You said you were handling a crisis. You were at a champagne reception in a gold dress. Her cheeks flushed red. Someone took pictures. You posted pictures. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Vivienne, I said quietly, why didn't you stay? I told you. Mother needed. No, the real reason. Why didn't you want to be there with me? She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because I was embarrassed. Of what? Of you, of the situation, of having to explain to people why my husband collapsed at a family luncheon. The truth hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting it. You were embarrassed of me, not of you, of the circumstances. What's the difference? The difference is that I love you, but I also have responsibilities to my family, to our reputation, to the way things look. And how do I look, Vivian? She didn't answer. Do I look like someone you're proud to be married to? Or do I look like a problem you have to manage? Darius, please, this doesn't have to be so dramatic. I stood up and put a $20 bill on the table. You're right. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be honest. Where are you going? Home. To think about some things. What things? Whether I want to stay married to someone who's embarrassed to be seen with me? I walked away before she could respond, but I could feel her watching me leave, and for the first time in our marriage, I didn't turn around to make sure she was okay. Outside the hotel, I stood on the sidewalk and breathed in the cool evening air. My phone buzzed with a text from her. Don't do anything stupid, we can work this out. I deleted it without responding. Then I called Uncle Silas. How did it go? He asked. About like you'd expect. She's embarrassed of me. Always has been. And how does that make you feel? Like I'm done asking permission to be myself. Good. Because tomorrow we're going to make some changes, starting with where you live. What do you mean? I mean you're not going back to that little apartment. Time for you to start living like who you actually are. That night, I sat in my small living room and looked around at all my humble possessions. Tomorrow, apparently, my whole life was going to change. But the strangest part was, I felt ready for it. For the first time in years, I felt ready to stop making myself small for other people's comfort. It was time to find out what Darius Cole looked like when he stopped apologizing for existing. 2 weeks later, I was standing in the driveway of a house I now owned, watching a moving truck pull away. The house wasn't a mansion. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. It was a beautiful, modern home in a quiet neighborhood where people minded their own business and respected each other's space. Mama walked out of the front door, shaking her head in amazement. I still can't believe this is real. It's real, Mama. Your father would be so proud and probably laughing at the look on certain people's faces when they find out. I hadn't told Vivian about the money yet. For 2 weeks, I'd been letting her think I was just being stubborn about our marriage problems. She'd called and texted every day, trying different approaches. Angry, then sweet, then threatening, then pleading. I'd answered exactly none of her calls, but word was starting to get around. When you suddenly start driving a different car and buying houses, people notice, especially people who make it their business to know everyone else's business. That afternoon, Marla stopped by. She'd been helping me navigate all the changes, keeping me grounded while my whole world shifted. How are you handling all this? She asked, sitting on my new back porch with a glass of iced tea. Better than I expected. Worse than I hoped. What do you mean? I mean, it's amazing to have choices, to not worry about money, to be able to take care of Mama properly. I looked out at the yard where Mama was planting flowers, but it's also terrifying how much it changes the way people look at you. Have you heard from Vivienne? Every day. She keeps saying we need to talk like adults, like mature people. Like the problem is that I'm being childish instead of that she abandoned me when I needed her most. Marla was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? Uncle Silas thinks I should let her keep calling. Let her worry. Let her wonder what's happening. What do you think? I think I need to face this, but on my terms this time. That evening, I finally called Vivian back. Darius, thank God, I've been worried sick about you. Have you? Of course I have. You disappeared. You won't return my calls. People are starting to ask questions. What kind of questions? About where you are? About whether we're having problems? About whether you've left me? Have I left you? I don't know. Have you? Because if you have, I need to know so I can handle things appropriately. There it was, the real concern. Not whether I was okay, not whether our marriage could be saved, whether she needed to start damage control. Let's meet, I said, tomorrow afternoon, your mother's house. My mother's house? Why there? Because I think it's time I had a conversation with your whole family, all at once. Darius, what's this about? You're scaring me. See you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. I hung up and immediately called Silas. You sure about this? He asked. I'm sure. It's time to stop hiding. You want me there? No. This is something I need to do myself, but I want you to know, whatever happens tomorrow, I'm grateful. You gave me back my choices. You always had choices, son. You just didn't know it. The next afternoon, I pulled into the Ashford Estate driveway in my new car. Not the most expensive car I could have bought, but nice enough to make a point, a sleek black BMW that whispered money instead of shouting it. I sat in the car for a moment, looking up at the mansion that had intimidated me for 3 years. Today, it just looked like a big house where small people lived. Vivienne met me at the front door. She was dressed perfectly, as always, but I could see the stress around her eyes. You look good, she said, eyeing the car. New job? Something like that. Cynthia was waiting in the formal sitting room, the same room where I'd been made to feel small so many times before. She looked me up and down with those cold eyes, clearly trying to figure out what had changed. Darius, she said coolly, Vivian said you wanted to speak with us. I did. Thank you for making time. I sat down across from both of them and took a moment to really look at this room. The expensive furniture, the crystal, the paintings that cost more than most people's houses. All of it designed to make people feel impressed, intimidated, or inadequate. Today, it just felt like a museum. Beautiful, but lifeless. I want to talk about respect, I said. Cynthia's eyebrows went up. Respect? Yes, about how people treat each other when they think no one is watching, about what happens when people show you who they really are. Darius, Vivian said, if this is about the hospital, it's about everything. It's about 3 years of being treated like a guest in my own marriage, like someone who should be grateful for scraps instead of someone who deserves a full meal. That's not fair, Vivian said. Isn't it? When's the last time you defended me to your mother? When's the last time you chose me over her opinion? When's the last time you acted like you were proud to be my wife instead of embarrassed? Cynthia made a soft noise of irritation. This is exactly what I warned Vivian about. Your people always make everything about race and class. My people? I stood up slowly. Mrs. Ashford, let me tell you about my people. I pulled out a folded piece of paper from my jacket pocket. A simple bank statement showing the balance in just one of my new accounts. I placed it on the coffee table between us. Cynthia looked down at the paper and her face went white. Vivian leaned over to see what it was and made a small, gasping sound. $50 million, I said calmly. That's walking around money while I figure out what to do with the rest. The rest? Vivian whispered. The rest of the inheritance my father left me. The trust fund I had no idea existed until 2 weeks ago. Cynthia was staring at the bank statement like it might bite her. This can't be real. It's very real, It's. Uncle Silas has been quite successful in business. My father invested early and wisely. And apparently, he knew exactly what kind of people you were, because he made sure I'd never have to beg you for anything. I sat back down and looked directly at Cynthia. You told me I was beneath your daughter's world, that some gaps are too wide to bridge, that I should stop clinging to fantasies about belonging. Her mouth opened and closed without any sound coming out. But here's the thing about money, Mrs. Ashford. It doesn't actually change who you are inside. I'm still the same man who fixes cars and loves his mother and tries to treat people with kindness. The only thing that's changed is now I have choices. I turned to Vivienne. And my first choice is this. I'm filing for divorce. What? She shot to her feet. Darius, no. We can work this out. We can fix this. Can we? Because I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. If you had known about this money 3 years ago, would you have treated me differently? She opened her mouth to say no, then closed it. The silence stretched between us. Would your mother have treated me differently? More silence. Would I have been invited to family dinners instead of being corrected like a child? Would you have defended me when people made comments about my background? Would you have stayed with me in the hospital instead of going to parties? That's not fair, she said, but her voice was weak. It's perfectly fair, because the answer is yes. You would have treated me completely differently if you'd known I had money, which means you never actually loved me. You loved the idea of fixing me, of lifting me up to your level, but you never saw me as an equal. I stood up and straightened my jacket. I won't be pursuing any of your family's assets. I don't need them, but I also won't be allowing you to pursue mine. My lawyers will be in touch. Cynthia finally found her voice. You can't be serious? You're throwing away a marriage over hurt feelings? I'm ending a marriage that never really existed. You can't throw away something that was never real in the first place. I walked toward the door, then turned back. And Mrs. Ashford? About those gaps being too wide to bridge? You were right. The gap between people who love each other and people who use each other is too wide to bridge. I'm just finally on the right side of it. I left them sitting in that perfect, lifeless room and walked out to my car. Through the window, I could see Vivian following me, but I didn't stop. She caught up to me as I was opening my car door. Darius, please, don't do this. I love you. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman I'd thought I'd spend my life with. This woman I'd made myself small for. Do you, Vivian? Or do you love what I can do for you? I love you, she said, reaching for my hand. I've always loved you. I gently removed her hand from mine. Then why did it take $50 million for you to fight for me? I got in my car and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I could see her standing in the driveway, getting smaller and smaller until she disappeared completely. 6 months later, I was sitting on my back porch watching Mama tend to her garden when Marla called. How are you doing today? She asked. Good, really good. Any regrets? I thought about it. About the divorce? No. About the years I spent trying to be someone else? Every day. But I can't change the past. What about the future? What about it? Well, there's this nurse I know who's been wondering if a certain rich guy might want to take her to dinner sometime. Somewhere nice but not too fancy. Somewhere that feels real. I smiled. I think I know a place. We'd been taking things slow, Marla and I. Real slow. Learning each other without the pressure of trying to fix anything or prove anything. It was the first relationship I'd ever had that felt like breathing instead of holding my breath. Darius? She said. Yeah? I'm proud of you for choosing yourself, for walking away from people who didn't see your value. Thank you. And your father would be proud too. He gave you exactly what you needed, exactly when you needed it. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet evening air and thought about choices, about the person I used to be and the person I was becoming. My phone buzzed with a text. From Vivian, I saw your car outside Mama's flower shop today. I just want you to know I think about you every day. I think about what we could have been. I read it twice, then deleted it without responding. Some things were too broken to fix. Some people were too far apart to bridge the gap, and some choices, once made, changed everything that came after. But for the first time in years, I was making those choices for myself. The evening was warm and quiet. Mama was humming while she worked in the garden. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear children playing in their yards. Normal sounds, good sounds, the sounds of a life where people loved each other simply and without conditions. I closed my eyes and listened to it all, thinking about the man I used to be who begged for love, and the man I was becoming who commanded respect. Tomorrow, Marla and I would go to dinner. Tomorrow, I'd work in my garage because I loved the work, not because I needed the money. Tomorrow, I'd call Uncle Silas and maybe learn more stories about our family. But today, I was exactly where I belonged, in my own space, on my own terms, finally free from the need to apologize for taking up room in the world. Some mornings I noticed Vivian's car would drive slowly past my house. She never stopped, never got out, just drove by like she was checking to see if the life she'd thrown away was still there, still real. I never acknowledged those drive-bys, never waved or looked in her direction, but I thought about her, sometimes sitting in that car, remembering the moment she left me sick and alone in a hospital bed like I was nothing. And then remembering that I'd walked out of that same hospital reborn as someone she could never reach again. Not with money, not with tears, not with regret. I'd become unreachable to people who only loved what they could use, and that, I'd learned, was the quietest and most complete revenge of all.